All right, so for the first 20 minutes or so, we're just gonna do a quick recap and overview. David and Kathy, you've been here for most of the series, but Carla is new, at least to the series for the most part. Um, so to summarize briefly, the word bardo just means transition state. So it's generally referring to transition between this present life and the next incarnation. But since all states are transitory, Bardo is also referring to the waking state. It refers to the dream state. It refers to the dreamless sleep state. It refers to the dying state. It refers to the after dying state, and refers to the rebirth state. And also, uh, the clear light that arises at death, I believe, is also a bardo. And I'd have to go back and check. And yeah, the bardo of the Dharmata. That's right. So all states being transitory, all states are bardos. There are some interesting similarities in the bardo teachings when compared to other schools of thought or systems of afterlife knowledge. So, for example, in the Egyptian system, or in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they have the same number of afterlife assessors that the Tibetan Book of the Dead does for the peaceful manifestation. So, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there are 100 deities that comprise a mandala of reality. And those 100 deities are representations of forces in the universe. So aspects of one's mandala. So a specific deity or a specific being will have particular qualities of one's psychology or a force in the universe. So, for example, Samanta Bajra, the blue being, represents the Dharmakaya, so represents the ultimate nature of mind being emptiness. You have the five Buddha families that are considered to be the representations of the five elements. So you have all the aspects of reality, or a very significant number of them, represented in deity forms. In the Tibetan system, you specifically have 42 peaceful manifestations that appear if you miss the clear light at death. So the idea is that the physical, once the elements that sustain the physical body begin to decay at the moment of death, the clear light of death begins to dawn. So it's considered that this is the moment of recognition. And if you have not been able to realize emptiness, enlightenment in your waking life during your incarnation, the moment that you will is at the moment of death if you're prepared for it. So the elements which sustain the physical body begin to collapse in on themselves, and as a result of that, the dharmata, the clear light, arises. And if recognition occurs, or if you're present for it, and you're clear of mind and you're prepared, bang, you realize the clear light of phenomena, and you can be reborn in the Pure Land. Or what happens after that is uh, depends. It depends on the presentation or who's talking about it, but Some say you're reborn in the Pure Land or you're reborn in the Bodhisattva realm and can then engage in Bodhisattva activity for the universe. Other systems, like some of the Tibetan systems or renditions of this that had more of a Vedantic slant on it, talk about like reuniting with the clear light for all of eternity, this kind of thing. So it depends on who's discussing it. Okay, so 42 peaceful manifestations. If you miss the clear light and this opportunity for enlightenment that happens at the moment of death, what occurs is your consciousness and your karmic habituation re-arise and give rise to a subtle body that will enter the transition phase between one life and the next. So in this transition phase are the classic renditions of judgment, um, the assessment of one's soul, the assessment of one's deeds. So you have the scales uh, of justice in the Western tradition, and you have many examples of this in all types of religions. That after death, there's a kind of reckoning, or an assessment of one's deeds and consciousness. So this initially occurs in the Tibetan system. There are peaceful manifestations that appear. So these are the peaceful deities. The idea is that if you were a practitioner, if you received these teachings, then at some point, through contact with one of the peaceful manifestations, you'll realize that you're in the bardo. You'll realize that you indeed have died. You'll take all things as being appearances of your nature, and then you will enter the clear light, and then into the Pure Land, achieving liberation. So you have 42 chances with the manifestations of the peaceful deities, 42 opportunities. Whether this actually happens 42 times or whether the 42 is a representation. Just took the wrong exit. Okay, anyways, whether the 40, 42 manifestations, whether that number is exact or whether it's metaphorical, we're not sure. But how we can regard it is that you will have ample opportunity after you have died with peaceful, pleasant appearing spiritual beings to recognize your nature. So if you're a Tibetan Buddhist, you'll see Buddhist figures. If you're from another religion, you'll see religious figures that match your beliefs generally, or are in accordance with them. In the Tibetan system, it seems that you have 7 days. The initial 7 days are the appearances of the peaceful manifestations. If you didn't get the clue after 7 days, after the peaceful manifestations, then the wrathful ones begin to appear. So in the same way that, I'll take an example of having a dream. If an angel appears to you in a dream, you might think, hey, this is a dream. I'm seeing an angel. So you get startled into lucidity. Something so unusual happens that you begin to question the reality of the state that you're in. And this is really the whole emphasis of the Bardo teachings, is that through these appearances you gain recognition of your state. You remember what it is that you are, or where you are, and what has happened. The challenge of the dying process and appearing in the bardo after the fact is that there is an amnesic quality that is characteristic of these states. In the same way that you don't have lucidity when you're dreaming, there's a chance that there's not lucidity or conscious awareness in people after they've passed away. Most of them seem fine, but um, the Bardo teachings urge us to be sure that we die with conscious awareness and that we're prepared for this for this transition. Because the Bardo has the the quality of has an amnesic effect on one's consciousness, preparation is necessary. And the reason that the Tibetans read the Book of the Dead to someone that has died is exactly for this reason, that there is a likelihood that they will not remember the teachings upon death. Because that likelihood and that possibility is there, they have someone do the reading of the liturgy for 40 days or 49 days. And the approach is interesting in the sense that how time operates in these in these gates is mysterious. So let's say it, the idea is that as soon as the person dies, they get the Bardo recitation, or they get the Bardo total Tibetan Book of the Dead read while they're going through the initial 40 days. So like the Lama will do a reading of a passage every single day, guiding them through the various dimensions of the Bardo. But what people also do is that they've done the recitations for someone after they've died, long after they've died, and the sentiment, or the from my understanding, or what I've heard about this, is that even if this reading occurs much later after death, it's almost like there's a kind of retro causative capacity where from our point we're in the future compared to in position to when that person had died, but that still has an effect somehow. So that's an interesting thing to consider, that time operates very differently in these transitions, or in these dimensions. It's not as linear as we are accustomed to. That being said, it's still recommended and uh, chanted in the first in the first 40 to 49 days of the passing of the individual. There are the 42 peaceful manifestations in the Tibetan system, and there are 42 assessors in the Egyptian system. So both books of the dead contain the number 42. Both books of the dead uh, explain a process of judgment, except I think in the Tibetan system, the judgment is from the wrathful manifestations, whereas in the Egyptian, it's just from these stern assessors. 42 of them, which correspond to different regions of Egypt, and those regions represent specific deeds. So, of the 42 assessors, each one governs over a specific kind of sin. So the assessor will ask you, have you taken life? Another assessor will ask you, have you Have you taken what was not given, or have you stolen? So on and so forth. It lists a whole series of transgressions, and that's part of the assessment. So what differentiates the Tibetan teaching specifically from other versions of this in other cultures is that the Tibetan Book of the Dead emphasizes to see what appears as being none other than the nature of your mind. So if you're undergoing the judgment and you have the sense, yes, I really was that person. I really did those things. I really um, committed those sins and engaged these transgressions on the souls of other beings. Then the judgment continues. But from the viewpoint of the Bardo total, every single contact with a peaceful manifestation or a wrathful manifestation is the opportunity to awaken from the drama of the Bardo. So the difference in the Tibetan approach is to realize emptiness and see, I'm in the dream of the Bardo. If you have identification with the previous incarnation, if you have identification with the things that happened, if you have identification with the transgressions that occurred and you take them as real, then the wrathful manifestations will continue. If you realize you're in the bardo and you don't take ownership of what has happened, instead you realize the absolute. You recognize all things as being manifestations of your nature, then you're liberated. So if you miss the clear light of death, second round, you got the opportunity to realize you're in the bardo when the peaceful manifestations come. Peaceful manifestations, you don't wake up, you got the wrathful manifestation. So the idea there is to shock you into awakening, shock you into recognition of your condition. That doesn't work out, then then there's about 3 other rounds, which concludes at getting liberated up to the point where you're about to enter a womb. So even right up to the point where you're about to, via the power of conditioned experience and your karma, you're about to take another birth. Even up to that point, recognition is possible, and realizing the clear light arising in the pure land, that's all still possible right up to um, entering the womb gate. Once you've entered the womb gate, it's done deal here. The chance of realizing the clear light is closed, and you're on the round for the next incarnation. So there's a difference between uh, beings that manifest their lives here from the bodhisattva realm, and then beings who their most recent birth or their most recent life was, let's say, of a traumatic nature. So, like if in your last life, um, some kind of traumatic incident had happened, or you had a life of significant regret and suffering, and there was no death with conscious awareness and no understanding of these afterlife mechanics and awakening and all of this, then generally your karma takes over, and after you die, you're in this strange reality, and depending on your karma and consciousness, that could look all kinds of different ways. Um, some people just end up in existences parallel to this one that are very similar. There's nothing particularly different. Other people experience or end up in the hungry ghost realm. Other people end up formless. So a teacher of mine named Mark Griffin, he said the reason the reason that people take up bodies is because existence without bodies is so profoundly different than existence with a body that you cling for one. Yeah. So you have some uh, traumatic life condition. A good example of this was a story. David and Kathy have heard this story, but it's important to illustrate this type of this specific function or specific amnesic phenomena in reincarnation. So this is from Far Journeys by Robert Monroe. And what was great about Far Journeys and about his work in general is that he had so many out of body experiences. He really mapped out a lot of these territories, and in more detail than the Tibetan Book of the Dead and in the ancient than in the ancient texts. So So in Bob's second book, he starts to learn more about these afterlife mechanics and what he called the belief system territories. So he found that humans, by the power of their collective thought after they've passed away, have generated afterlife realities which coincide with particular religious beliefs. So the Muslims have their heaven, the Christians have theirs, all these different religious, spiritual groups. There's even belief system territories for philosophers. This kind of thing. He found that once a person was stuck or on the Earth reincarnation cycle, they would alternate between physical incarnations and the belief system territories again and again and again and again and again and again until something begins to set in the soul, which he called escape velocity. Buddhism calls it dispassion. So at some point, you start to get tired of this place. And it's that point that uh, awakening begins to occur. So what Bob found in the second book was he appeared in one of these entry ports. So like there's many different ways that beings reincarnate here or incarnate here from other reality systems that are not Earth. And one of these was like a particular he just called it an entry port for off-world intelligences to to incarnate here. So he appeared in one of these because he was getting a like basically a past life recall. No, I wouldn't put it that way. He was so those levels are outside time. One of the ways that outside time as we experience it here, one of the things that Bob talked about in Far Journeys that was kind of strange and weird to grapple with was that what he discovered was that a certain level of OBE, like if you go high enough, you end up popping out of the time space that is characteristic of reincarnation and life on Earth. So what he found was higher forms of intelligence or off-world intelligences are engaged in a kind of simulation game on the planet. Some of them. So basically, if you were to come to Earth, you would pick if you wanted to. You could pick like, okay, I'm gonna be so and so in the year 500 BC, and then you would just like playing a video game. You would live this year in 500 BC, and then you pop back out onto what you were, which is this higher intelligence on the other side. In this example, in the entry port, one of the entry ports to Earth life. So the whole time track of our history is available to other forms of intelligence. And so you pick a simulation, the year 1250 or whatever, and then that simulation ends. You pop back out. You're right back where you were, and the idea was that for these beings, they weren't forced to reincarnate again here. But what would happen is that oftentimes the impressions and the experiences that were available on this planet were very addictive to non-physical intelligences. Like the things that you can experience here are not available in other reality systems. So Bob shares a story where he gets to um, this level that's outside the gravity of the Earth's reincarnational pull, and is experiencing how beings appear in human bodies here, at least some of them. And in this OBE, he's there with a friend from another reality system called BB. And initially, BB and him uh, had. It's gonna sound interesting. They were on some kind of interdimensional galactic tour of the solar system from a reality that Bob Monroe called KT-95. So he's here in this entry thing, and what's happening is that sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, so they're in the entry port, and like I said, Bob's now outside of time, so he's not Bob at this level. He's a swirl he's a swirl of energy, and this other person is he's giving it the name BB, who's also a swirl of energy, and they're both from another reality system. And this is how Bob ended up recalling how his incarnational plight on Earth began. So, um, yeah. So the swirl that Bob ends up finding out was him. Decide he experiences the intensity of the human Earth vibrations, like all the activity that's going on here. It's perceptible to non-human intelligences at a distance. So he's like passing by, they're passing by Earth, and they're like, whoa, there's a bunch of wild stuff happening down there, let's go check that out. So then they go to entry port, and the entry port gives them a whole analysis of what life is like on Earth and all the kinds of experiences people can have, all the things that people do to each other down here, how long this learning system has existed, the originators of the learning system, all this pretty fascinating information. And Bob, as a swirl, um, was like, yeah, I want to experience this place. And so the entry director is like, sure, you can go down there, but there's some capitulations, there's some contingencies and things that you need to be careful about. And Swirl Bob was like, sure, whatever. I'm all for it. I can handle whatever happens down there. And the guy's like, well, that's what everyone says. and so and so he explains to pre Bob that it's a very addictive experience down there. I can't guarantee that it's going to go well for you at all. Actually, it may be terrible. And pre Bob is like, yeah, I don't care, let's do it. So he like pulls out this like a hologram thing, and he checks all the boxes and says yes. And then the entry director says, okay, well, um, so we have a lot of openings in Africa, India, Manhattan, New York. Not really. It's pretty congested to get you in there, but lots of openings in these particular parts of the world. And then Bob is like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. New York sounds okay. New York sounds okay. Sure, sure. And then the entry director is like, okay, okay, here, we got you in, bang. And then he's like, Bob makes some swoosh sound, and then he finds himself on the floor, like a 14-year-old mother in the Bronx had just given birth to him on a linoleum floor. Yeah, in Brooklyn, and that's how his Earth life began, or his incarnations on Earth began. And so he undergoes experience and life as a woman, and then his life ends, and he pops back out. He dies, and he's back in the entry station. And the guy's like, "Hey, how was it?" And he's like, "It's incredible, actually. But I only got one half of the experience because I was a woman. I have to experience the other half and become a man." And the guy's like, uh huh, okay. So then he sends him back down, and to make a long story short, Bob comes up with a couple other reasons or a few other reasons to take a few more lives. And by the time he's taken the fifth life, or the fifth round, the fifth simulation, he doesn't remember what he is anymore. So he pops back into the um well, he was supposed to pop back into the entry port, but when the guides appeared, he was on a battlefield, and he had been killed on a battlefield, and he wasn't able to recognize the guides because he was blinded by the rage of having just been killed in battle. And so Bob is seeing in this particular scene, Bob is seeing his former self lose himself in this cycle, and BB is attempting to wake him up and get him back to the entry port. And BB's like, Bob, we're not like, he doesn't call him Bob. He's like, we're not from here. We need to go back home. We need to go back home. This isn't what's supposed to be happening. And Bob from the future is looking back, observing Bob, now basically as a hungry ghost, enraged. So that's what happens. The power of the experiences here, and the karma that is born of those experiences, these habitual fixations, they keep us locked into space-time human consciousness. So that's an example of the amnesic effect. How a person had lived, how a person died, has a direct effect on their consciousness after death. So yeah, if a person was a soldier, and had revenge as the last thought on their mind, then often what the the bardo that follows is very it's akin to the consciousness that they had while they were living. Not always, but in many cases. So in Bob's case, it really only took a few rounds being on Earth until he was completely lost and immersed in the Earth experience, had completely forgotten what he was in spirit. That is the power of this place. Um, it makes you forget. The bardo of the waking state has a similar effect, or it also has this. When people are young, um, they have a lot of spiritual brightness still, or they have a lot of light. They have a lot of hope, belief, faith, and uh, the voice of their purpose and the voice of their destiny, the voice of their higher self, is very perceptible up to a certain age, unless traumas happen very early to block it off. But often people have much more of a sense of being spiritually free in their youth than they do as adults. There's a reason for that. The bardo of this life makes us forget what it is that we came here for. In the transition state between this life and the former one, there were certain decisions that were made um, for many of us. So, certain objectives that were laid out with the planning intelligences within the higher self matrix. And that's a person's destiny. So that's what you see when you get a Vedic natal chart, or um, you have some form of accurate astrology. It's seeing into the design of one's destiny. So it gets all assessed from up there. What's the likelihood that you'll follow through on X, Y, and Z? What's the likelihood that you won't? In the event that you won't, what may or may not occur? And then the game begins. So often in the first 14 years of someone's life, they come into contact with this calling. They come into contact with the purpose, the destiny for their incarnation. But the amnesic effect of the bardo of the living or the waking state, and yeah, and amnesia sets in. Once enough trauma has occurred, or enough hopelessness and letdowns have occurred, confusion sets in, and amnesia. You forget, or you become parted from the calling. Later it can return, or later it can present itself again, and that's this whole process with awakening. If there were these core values and a core sense of purpose that was there in the beginning, but after a certain time it just disappears, which is the case for almost everybody. That's part of the game here. That's part of how this bardo works. By forgetting the destiny, there has to be a finding of the destiny. By forgetting the awakening, there's inevitably a reawakening. So the calling presents itself in the early period of life, and if it's not engaged or followed, then usually some form of an ordinary or quote unquote conventional existence occurs, and then crisis happens and the calling returns. That's usually the format. So back to the bardo stuff, and then I'll take some questions. With the 42 assessors in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the 42 peaceful manifestations. It's only the Tibetan system that tells you to recognize these as manifestations of your own nature, to realize them as manifestations of the nature of your mind, and thus arise as the Dharmakaya, or arise as the totality um, of Buddha nature, or the absolute. What does that mean? It means having this direct recognition of non-duality, no longer regarding those objects and those experiences as real or outside of oneself. So you fully awaken to what someone would describe as a God state, or a state of total remembrance. And from there, there's agency. There's the birth or the dawn of choice in the process of reincarnation. When you completely remember what you are, you're able to remember. You're able to know what it is you're supposed to do, or what it is you'd like to do next. Without that remembrance, the amnesic effect of the dream overpowers us. So really, this is all that's happening in your spiritual practice, your meditation, and with the process of awakening that's unfolding for you now. You're already in a bardo. You're in a transition state between the last life and the next life. You're in the transition state between what was prior to this incarnation and what happens after death. There's two transition states between incarnations. You're sandwiched between those two. So what's happening here is exactly what happens in in the bardo. Just that in the bardo, you're outside space time, uh, the same kind of space time that we experience here. So you experience events happening all at once because we're physically incarnated. We have the phenomena of duration. Everything that's happening is because of attachments. Everything that's happening is because of karma. Everything that's happening is because of our predispositions and our inclinations. Even in terms of awakening, uh, we're often we're often able to meet these teachings and um, follow this path because we've done so in the past. We have the karmic roots for it, as Buddhism would say. So in the same way that it's possible to recognize emptiness right now, this is what you're going for at the moment of death also. It's just that the pressure of the dissolution of the elements, the pressure of having to part from this world, can affect an untrained consciousness. That's why there's 40 days of recitation, 42 peaceful manifestations, 58 wrathful manifestations. So you have you have give or take 100 chances to wake up to the fact that something might be wrong and you're dead. If you could recognize the nature of the state that you're in, that's realization. That's understanding. If you recognize this very moment as an appearance, if you recognize this very moment as emptiness, if you recognize this very moment as the clear light, the Dharmata, as Buddha nature, if in this very moment you have awareness, wisdom, then this is exactly what you die in at death. Namkai Norbu said, the most important thing at the moment of death is to die in Guru Yoga, which means to die in presence, and to die in presence with the masters of your lineage, to die in the natural state of realization. It's interesting if you consider, how these 42 peaceful manifestations appear and how these 58 wrathful manifestations appear, and they wake you up to yourself essentially. uh it can be the same way with the conditions and people that we meet in our waking state, if we're able to integrate our practice with that. um Most of the time we just take whatever's happening as whatever's happening, but if we see what's unfolding as a psychological drama, then the question which appears is that what is this aspect of the drama attempting to teach me? What is it attempting to show me? What is it attempting to wake me up to specifically? Final reiteration here of the various teachings. It's it's likely only this one that says when you're undergoing judgment, like when you're standing before the judges of the underworld, the wrathful manifestations, if you're able to realize they're none other than your own nature, they're none other than your own self, essentially. If you're able to break free from the illusion of doership, that that there were these things you did, that those actions actually existed, that the person that you were actually existed, that the person you did those things to actually existed. If you're under the impression that all of these that this life was something apart from you and that it was real, then you'll suffer the consequences of that belief, which would be condemnation and then damnation, for example. If in the moment of judgment there is recognition that there's actually no one to be judged, and that the judgment that is being placed upon you is actually an illusion, that it's a mechanism built into the structure of consciousness and of these after death simulations or experiences. Boom, recognition dawns, and you pop out of that bardo. It's very similar to how in very deep crisis you can have an awakening to spirit or to non-duality, to self. Like right in the most intense contractions of your incarnation, something cracks and you awaken. That's possible after death if you receive these teachings, if you heard what I just said. or you heard it from someone else. The pressure can be so strong, you actually have this big mind that you recede into, and you see a larger perspective. You see that it's actually a show, it's actually a drama. Everyone's just living out karma. Everyone's just living out predispositions and tendencies. Rarely ever does anyone actually make a choice like with full consciousness. Most choices are habitual, but a full consciousness choice, pretty rare. So, pretty rare. So that's the kind of summary overview of this whole thing. Whatever the state is, however it's appearing, uh, recognition is possible at any moment in time, and there are specific junctures between states where the clear light of the Dharmakaya dawns. So I'll give you an example. If you die in a dream, there's a transitionary state between the death in that dream and then the arising of your consciousness in the physical body. And if you have some awareness, or if you have awareness of this and recollection of it after the fact, what happens is you literally experience being a person in the dreamscape, dying, undergoing some intense situation and drama, and then everything, like this light that is the nature of the forms of the dreamscape and of all reality just bleeds through and envelops everything. And there's no self, there's no other, there's no worlds, there's not even, I mean, it's hard to even say that awareness is present in that there's just this very profound light, and then bang, somehow you end up here, or you wake up here. The forms and perceptions of this particular state assert themselves, and they cover the light of the dharmata, and then your memory clicks in, and there you are on the couch. So that's an example of experiencing the clear light at a transition between the dream state and the waking state. In the same way, there's uh, also a dawning of the clear light in the transition between uh, the living state and uh, yeah, that arises at the moment of death. So okay, James, how'd you end up in here? Were you
Yeah.
check- were you
Oh.
checking the group chat?
No, I showed up early. Then I saw on WhatsApp that it was starting at 8, so I was a bit late.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Okay, because I was gonna email you and tell you to come, but then I had to get in my car, and I was like, dang it. But I'm glad you checked the WhatsApp. I didn't know that you ever checked it.
Yeah, I do. I do.
Awesome. Awesome, man.
And Ryan, I was wondering, is the fact that we're all here, I mean, does that mean we didn't catch any of the hints or liberate during the Bardo, or is it like some of us consciously choose to take another incarnation?
Yeah, I think many, because there's degrees of liberation, right? But I think many of us, um just because you realize the bardo at the moment of your last at the moment of death of your last incarnation, once you were in the transitional state, you could have chosen uh whatever conditions that you're subject to in this life. Either way, it doesn't mean just because you realize the clear light in your last life that in this one you're going to be this supremely enlightened being from birth. Yeah, I mean, you can choose. Some people do end up choosing that, if they have the capacity to. But often um, that's not what is picked. Yeah, because if you look at the biographies or people who were considered reincarnations of great masters, even in their case, you find that their awakening didn't occur till much later um, in their lives, or the dawn of their enlightenment didn't occur till later. So, because I think an idea in some many, I guess, threads of spirituality is that if you were liberated at death in the past life, in your most recent life, then for sure in this one you're going to be a Buddha like right out of the womb. And that's yeah, that doesn't seem to be the case. So if anything, your recognition of the clear light in your last life is the only reason you're hearing about it this time. So it could be the complete inverse, because many people hear the teachings on the Book of the Dead, or they hear teachings on awakening. I mean, you can think of all the people who come to Buddhism, who are in Buddhist temples or grew up with Buddhism, but none of them are actually interested in awakening. And it's the same way with Hinduism or Vedanta. Like millions and millions and millions of people are born into these spiritual systems, and probably less than 10% actually take it seriously. So that goes to show, how rare it is. I suspect that it's only because of prior recognition of the clear light that it's even possible to encounter these teachings again.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I think it's might be Buddhism where they have like the terminology of like once returner, or I don't know, like stream winner or something like that. Some of those terms are like you're coming back at least like 3 times or something at least.
Yeah, in the Buddhist four path model, which I think could be different from what we're talking about here. It's hard to know for sure. But in the Buddhist four path model, so 4 stages, when you enter the first stage, you have seven more lives on Earth. And the second stage, it's you only have to come back once. The third stage, you don't have to come back. You'll be reborn in the Pure Land, and you can attain nirvana from there. And then if you reach the fourth stage, you're done. So what's interesting is that in Far Journeys, Bob Monroe also finds this 7 life model, which was fascinating to me. He claimed that from these entry port levels, that there were beings awaiting their final run on the Earth's reincarnation cycle, and that these beings, while they were waiting for their last life, they radiated a kind of light that was not perceptible anywhere else in the known universe he explored. And once they went and they did their final round, poof, they were just gone. Just couldn't be found in the known universe that he had explored, or like he couldn't tune into their signatures anymore to find them. So that was one thing he mentioned. And another thing that Bob mentioned that was very pertinent was that one of the main reasons souls come here is to meet a graduate of this earth learning system. Like some people come here for entertainment purposes and they just get caught up in the thing. But a lot of people come here because at some point these great souls take their last incarnation, and that by being here there's an opportunity to learn from those what Bob called last timers, basically masters of reality, graduates of the earth learning system. Yeah. So I don't know if you read Buddhism, but like it's a pretty it's it's a pretty shocking similarity. Um Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting, and I think in as far as the seven life model thing, that's very characteristic of Buddhism. I don't think I've heard that anywhere else. Bob may have borrowed it from Buddhism, but if he didn't, these are the only two systems I know of that specifically said it's seven lives and you're done. Except in Buddhism's case, it says you enter nirvana and then no one knows what happens after that, right? At least Theravada Buddhism says that. Mahayana Buddhism says seven lives, you're done, you become an arahant, and then you graduate to these bodhisattva stages of omniscience. What Bob said was that seven lives, you're done, you're off the earth reincarnation cycle, you're no longer perceptible, findable in the known universe, which the Buddha also said you couldn't find an arahant after they passed away. Like he couldn't find them with his supernormal abilities. They were not locatable. What Bob had received from one of the entities, one of the beings he came into contact with, was that once your seven lives, you've reached a specific amount of escape velocity, and it's seven more lives till your last run. Once you've done your last run, you graduate into another kind of reality system that is outside this universe and inconceivable. So that's what he gets into in the third book. So that may actually be the case, or that may be the same thing as what Buddhism is saying. Mahayana Buddhism is saying is once you pass the eighth bodhisattva stage, you become this. You reach these omniscient, omnipresent configuration levels of reality, which which at the outset doesn't seem significant. Like when you think about that, you're like, oh, it's just another. What's the point of experiencing, becoming a super consciousness? Like it's just another form of consciousness. What's the point? Mahayana Buddhism would say that it's only from the eighth stage and beyond on the bodhisattva stages that you're able to help sentient beings become free from ignorance and free from suffering at like the structural level. So how I would put it is like if there are mechanisms to there are mechanisms or aspects of this system that keep beings asleep and perpetuate suffering, there's the opposite of that. And the opposite of that are the intentions and the minds of the bodhisattvas, the arhats, and the Buddhas. And that actually is stated that the only reason beings awaken at all is because of the collective vows of the oceans of the enlightened ones. So I think Monroe's work, surprisingly, makes some of these aspects of Buddhism a bit more understandable. Mark Griffin, for example, would say like the reason any of us wake up at all is because of the samadhis of the masters of reality, the masters, the omniscient beings, omniscient intelligences, omniscient consciousnesses, which are uh, which are at the root of things. So, like we think of masters as humans that lived and died, but Mark's not talking about that. You know. Well, I hope this was good and that it was a good recap. Uh, Carla, did this make sense?
You know, um, yeah, it did. I mean, I was looking up Robert Monroe, the Swirl Bob character, because I was just curious to, yeah, I was just curious to hear more about him. Um, but there is, I mean, the terminology is interesting just in relation with the amnesia. Um, and also the place of crisis, that place of, um, yeah, that place of crisis, that place, where, well, I wrote it down actually. What did you say? Yeah, I mean, really, just the realization, the very moment is Buddha nature, and when you start talking about guru yoga, I mean, for me, I definitely am um, feeling into all of this. I don't really have a question, but yeah, it's I did read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. When I was in Thailand, actually, it was a friend of a friend I was traveling with, her Thai boyfriend actually passed away, and
Wow.
I yeah, and it was an experience where yeah, I think he had a liver condition. I think he had jaundice, um and he kept saying that he was turning yellow, and no one was listening to him. So similar to my father in that sense of the desperation. But I went to um we weren't in the same town, and I went to stay at this room. I took a room because I was waiting for her to come meet me. And I opened the door, and on the bed was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Living in the Dead, and it was my first time reading it.
What?
Yeah, that happened. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was there. Probably the previous traveler, I guess, left it, or someone left it, or it was placed there for me, of course. And yeah, so it's stirring a lot of that. The crisis awakening, the calling, you know. That's what you said. The crisis awakening, the calling. Yeah. And he did pass away. He had liver failure.
Wow.
Yeah. And I still have that same copy actually, because it's like tethered, held with a string.
This is the Sogyo Rinpoche version, right? Tibetan Book of Living.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
And so Robert Monroe, um, I mean, I guess his channeling, I don't even know what word to use with his writing. I was reading a little bit about BB as you were talking and sharing, and did you meet this person, Bob
Did I meet?
Monroe? Yeah,
Uh,
did you meet him?
no, no. Bob died, I think, in 1995.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I never met Bob. But the reason I mean, one of the main reasons I mention him a lot in in my work. Um, I guess I'm not sure how common it was for people at the Monroe Institute to start experiencing the things that he talked about. At least in the later part of the second book and in the third book. So, like specifically when he talks about
Mm,
reaching what he calls his I there, or the it of me,
mhm,
it was from that uh, level of consciousness, which appeared like it had a technological appearance. And in one of these rooms, he saw a bed of flowers. And when he would go and reach down and touch a flower, in the center of the flower was a face, and that was one of his other lives. So there was like a
Mm.
bed of like 4,000 flowers, right, or however many. And so when he would touch the center of a flower, he would appear in that life. So this happened to me, but
Wow.
instead of flowers, it was screens. So a lot of things that Bob experienced, I began experiencing before I read his books. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons I cite him frequently. Yeah.
Can you say more? It happened to you with, you said screens? Like,
Yeah, like so in in for example, Buddhist literature, it'll say he or she attained the recollection of their former existences, and then it'll say something like
mhm,
he or she is able to discern that they were from this, from this nation, from this people in this era, whatever, right? But
mhm.
it doesn't ever describe the structure of that experience because these texts are like 2,500 years old. So how it happened for me was after I entered cessation of perception and feeling for like the third time, my
Mhm.
consciousness, the black screen of my mind just morphed into a room. And in that room, there was a wall of screens. And the screens were all first person point of view of a person doing some random activity. And my consciousness then zoomed in on one of the screens, and I do remember having a thought there actually, which was there was some hesitation. I was wondering that, if I proceed into this screen, will I disappear from my life here forever? That's how real it was. And I proceeded anyways, and then I appeared in the body of an unknown blonde woman, and what appeared to be like the 1970s, and there was like these flower wallpaper that was in her house, and she was alone, and she just walked through the kitchen, through the back door, sat down on a chair, and we watched the autumn leaves falling, and it was as real as like this conversation, this
Mm.
moment that we're having right now. And I had access to her memories, I had access to her emotions, all of that. And then my consciousness zoomed out from there, back in the room, and then it proceeded to go through each screen one by one, and then it progressed. It turned into some kind of, it was like, when you pull a slot machine. So
Mhm.
when you pull a slot machine, there's all these like rotating, spinning screens or spinning squares with symbols in them. So there
Mhm.
was there was this massive, like a Rolodex, essentially, of lives. And when I emerged from this, I only remembered hers in clear detail. But then as I was waking up, my face and my body would change with like each split second that passed. So it was like man, woman, 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 man, man, woman, woman, man, woman, and my body and face kept changing. Alien, 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 man, woman, alien, alien, man, woman. Like thousands, thousands of transformations.
My God. Huh.
Yeah, and then I woke up.
And how were you?
Um, the memories of my life were not recognizable.
Mm.
So I was like, if there was ever a moment that I was really blown out,
Mm.
it was that one. Yeah, I had thought, oh shit, I've gone too I've actually gone too far. Not that I didn't like I didn't lose my sanity or anything, but I just couldn't perceive any Ryan at all. Like it was gone. It was like being this um eternal blob of peace, you know?
Mm, mhm.
Mm, yeah. There was just no there was no continuity in time as far as my uh who I was as a person anymore. So when that happened and I came out of it, it was only like the fifth day on the retreat, and I had a decision, which was um I can push this further and possibly like blow myself out permanently. But if I do that, yeah, basically I'll come off of this retreat like, and then I'll go home to my ex and my mother, and I won't be the same person anymore. And at that period of time, I only had like 6 months left with my ex, so I decided to quit the retreat, and I stopped meditating after that morning. So I went into the retreat, into the interview room with Delson. I was like, hey, I experienced my past lives, and we've already had this conversation. I'm gonna stop meditating now. And he's like, okay.
Oh my god.
So
Oh.
yeah, so that was that.
I
But
mean,
it
just
was,
the feeling of, like, extreme non-attachment.
yeah,
It's
it was an entirely inhuman state. Is
yeah, like,
is
thinking
how
of the
it was.
faces, that moment with the faces, like, extreme non-attachment.
Yeah, yeah. Because you wake up in this like very different, you basically wake up as what you are on the other side of all of this. You
Mm,
wake up as what you are, as that being that has lived 4,000, 10,000, 40,000 lives, right? That
mhm,
is absorbing all the data from these nodes that has projected into the matrix. You wake up as that thing, and your life is just tiny. Your life is tiny. It's like a speck, and you're just this everything. And yeah, so
mm,
I still had some semblance. I had enough will to choose not to proceed. At least that much was left. And then after like 2 or 3 days, my normal consciousness set back in. So my normal consciousness is non-dual, but it's not like that thing. That thing is like, yeah, it's not like I've said before, it's not that reality becomes more or less. It's just that the configuration or the operating system you appear in is different. Like the same way that an animal consciousness is not the same as the human consciousness. The human
mm,
consciousness is not the same as the higher self consciousness. They all have the same nature, which is reality or dharmakaya or Buddha nature, mind, but how that the capacities of each configuration are different. So like when I was in that state, I could close my eyes and appear somewhere else. Like there was no OBE exit. There was no I need to intend to go here. There was no like maybe I'll succeed, maybe I won't. Nope. It was like I close my eyes, I'm there. Whatever reality, any
mm.
reality. Whatever life, any world, any place, anytime. I don't have access to that at the moment.
Maybe this week coming up.
Yeah, you're right.
You never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so for my ex mostly, I was like, and I guess, and even for myself too, I was like, I still had that attachment. I was like,
Mm.
I don't want to lose these 6 months. I can, I can pick up where I left off with this at some other point in time. So, but yeah, it was really strange. I really had the thought in that moment, or I was like walking around or something afterwards. After I woke up and stepped out of the cabin, and like I went for a walk, and it was just this total inhuman thing, and I just thought, wow, like why on earth would anyone want this? I mean, this is so far removed from what I thought enlightenment or awakening was. I thought awakening was just like, hey, you just come to peace and you stop suffering and you're really happy, you know, but and maybe that's what it is for a lot of people, but that thing, I mean, like what's happiness when you've experienced happiness in 100,000 incarnations? What's happiness when you have that much of a vantage point, that much of an overview, that like literally everything you've done, everything that you're seeking, everything that you're processing, you pop into this background thing and you see that you've done it countless times, countless times, and you're like, oh, the only reason I continue to be reborn, the only reason I enter this simulation at all, the only reason I project these nodes into reality is for
Mm.
love. And not the kind of love that we're used to, you know, not the conditional love, like you do it for the bodhisattva vow. Like you have to project a consciousness, and that consciousness projection has to forget itself, because that's what has to happen in order for it to like generate the human consciousness here and then actually serve other people and do things and help. That's not possible if you're born with that higher self recollection. It makes it impossible to generate the human consciousness and be stabilized in space time. Like you actually have to forget what you are on the other side in order to go through the process of awakening here. Like there's some people apparently
Mm.
that are born with past life recollection, but
Mhm.
I don't think they're born with that thing, that like I'm the ancient one. I dreamt all of this. I don't think people are born with that. If you're born with that, like I don't know how you could survive. I don't know how.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I was listening
I
to
mean,
a really good Neville Goddard talk last night where he said at some point you'll realize that um, the story of Christ and the stories in the Bible are about you. That like you're actually the Christ, or like all beings are the Christ, and Christ left the Father outside of the dream. He left himself outside of the dream in order to enter the world. And yeah, I can't remember what he said. I'm trying to remember what he said. Like the full reason for it was like it wasn't like a damnation or something, but it was a decision. Yeah, but I can't recall what his particular thesis on that was. Bob Mon- Bob Monroe's thesis was that on the other side we have these omniscient or like I'll just tell you what happened or what he said happened. In the third book, he finally pops out of the Matrix and he appears in this basically reality outside of our universe or outside of known universes. And he said that our whole universe was generated inside a device. and he's now popped out of the device into that consciousness that exists outside the dream. And he was looking at, and then there were other beings there, or like other super consciousnesses there. And they looked at him and they were like, you're not complete. And then he's like, what do you mean I'm not complete?
Oh my God.
and they're like and they're like and they're like you have to go back in and get the rest of yourself, like all the other selves that are like in the matrix that are lost. You have to
Oh.
you have to get them to wake up, and then you can all leave to base reality together. You can all leave to what's outside the dream together. But you as you are now, it's you're like missing the rest of you. And Bob said that these super intelligences were made up of, like, it's like the bodhisattva stuff you hear from Mahayana. These beings were made up of countless individuated consciousnesses. And so then they said, they were like, they gave him some discourse that sounded a lot like the Heart Sutra or something. Like, there are no teachers, there are no students, there's only a plan. And then he re-entered what he calls the emitter, and then he appeared in his eye there first, and then he appeared in his body. And his body had been so far from his physical vessel, or like he had been so deep in this experience that he wasn't able to move his body immediately, and his limbs were cold. And so when he woke up, his realization was, the reason we entered the dream at all is to develop this thing called super love. So he said the collective experience of thousands, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands of incarnations produces this understanding called super love. And it's the only thing that makes us more than what we were when we came in to the dream.
Wow.
That was his theme.
Like the cosmic pledge of love. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Huh.
Yeah, so you go from, like, I don't know how, but you go from perfection to perfection plus. After you get the plus after doing samsara, according to Bob Monroe.
Wow. And you've read his books, I am assuming, because you're speaking of it so clearly. Did
First
you?
of all, not only have I read his books, I've listened to everything this guy has ever said. Okay, whatever exists that is recorded of this man, I have listened to it.
I was thinking of the books from Ojai,
I'm like, this guy is a pioneer in consciousness. All right, like Guru is a great meditation teacher, is fantastic. I'm one of them, but like, this dude was something else. Like, he actually got a much clearer overview, I feel, than what so many people ever produce in a single lifetime. Yeah. And
And he was a radio broadcaster, which is
yeah,
fascinating.
he was a telecommunications entrepreneur in North Carolina, or in Virginia. Yeah. He developed the binaural beat technology. Like, I think
Oh.
he was the first one to patent that. Yeah, he called it hemisync. But now it's known as all kinds of things, right? Isochronic and whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the original stuff that came out in the 60s and 70s, yeah, he developed that.
No. Well, I will definitely. Oh yeah, there's a lot of videos. I'm gonna listen to some for sure.
Yeah, yeah. His I actually probably, I mean, I'll share it in the group chat, like an interview that he did, because the three, but like, there's the only drawback from reading the three books is that they're so good that, like, he was afraid that it would become its own religion, you know?
Yeah.
And in an effect, it has, I'm sure, to many people. But he always stressed, discovering all of this for yourself, and, verifying it, whatever. He also made the case that it doesn't appear the same way to everybody, which is a pretty significant revealing. So, like, when I entered the past life knowledge, that appeared to me as screens. In his case, it was a bed of flowers, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the access point to that specific knowledge. Those can appear differently, and yeah, there's just a lot of variation that can occur. But yeah, I think far journeys. I always like ultimate journeys more because if it explains so many things. Um, but as far as like a tour de force of out of body experience, I mean, there's no book better than Far Journeys. Yeah,
Mm.
there just isn't, because most of the literature on astral projection and out of body experience is all the same. Like, it's like, okay, this is how you get out of your body. This is what you need to be. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to be careful about. And these are the kinds of beings you can meet on the other side. That's about it. Bob Monroe's like, this is an Earth learning system. These are the 5 different ways on this planet. This kind of stuff. And none
Yeah.
of it was procured through hypnosis. This was all through actual out of body stuff. And then with his team of explorers, he had all of them do out of body exploration to corroborate what they were discovering as a team. So it was all pretty fascinating.
And curious, did you, before your experience with seeing the screens, um, did you feel something coming upon?
Yeah, yeah,
Can you speak to that? Because that moment before, yeah, can you speak to that?
yeah. Can you give me 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, give me 2 minutes. Hold on. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay.
All right, this is actually pretty cool because James, Kathy, and Carla, I don't think you've ever heard this story. So on this same retreat that we've been discussing here. So what led to that whole, like, past life matrix coming on and opening up was, I was on a silent retreat, and then on like day 4 or something. It was either day 3 or day 4. Um, they began to recommend that you do these really long sits to experience
Mm.
cessation.
Mhm.
And Delson was like, "Yeah, sit for as long as you can." And I was like, "That's a long time for me, man." And he's like, "Yeah," however long, just do it. And I was like, "Yeah, well, okay, like what, 6 hours?" And he's like, "Yeah, without moving. If you can sit for 6 hours without moving, do it." And so like he challenged me, you know. So then I had to perform. So the next day, and it's not cross-legged though. You're in a chair, but it's still 6 hours without moving in a chair is, I mean, at least for me, it's brutal. So at the time, yeah, it's fourth day or something like that. I get in the chair, I sit down, I make the determination to not move for 6 hours, and then go through cycle after cycle after cycle of getting into high equanimity of formations, high, just very, very deep stillness, and but popping out, then going back up, popping out, going back up, popping out. It was pretty incessant. The pain was really excruciating.
Mm.
At some point, this like final billow, it was like being lifted up by a supreme cloud of equanimity. I mean, this was like the most exquisite equanimity ever. And I was just yeah, it was like so powerful. I forgot about all the pain for a second. And then one of the three characteristics appeared. So the suffering door appeared. Everything turned to suffering. Everything turned to suffering. It was like the whole universe was crying. And
Mm.
I was confronted with my core attachments. So my dad appeared and my ex appeared. And then the voice of guidance said, "Let them go." And
Mm.
that meant like completely, like forever, you know. Or at least it felt like
Mhm.
that in that moment.
Mhm.
And so I did it. So there was just this release, and I let them go, and the images faded, and then boom, like a roller coaster falling down. Like I just started tunneling through the ground, and this wasn't mental images at this point. Like it was literally like shifting into an out of body experience or something. I just started tunneling through the ground. I was lifted up all the way to the ceiling, like dropped down this. It was like imagine like flicking a ring um, down some kind of like tube. The consciousness was spinning
Mhm.
like that, and there was this torus. That was the last form. It was like this universal form or something. It was a toroidal energy form. Do you know what that is? It kind of looks like a donut.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a torus, and then flashbang, everything disappears. The whole universe collapses, vanishes, and um, there was this like reality without awareness or consciousness without awareness, and the field of experience arose as these golden discs. So like instead of seeing the code of the matrix like with like green ones and zeros, the
Mhm.
the code of experience was these golden dependent origination discs. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It was just like these little golden gears inside spheres, and like that was everything. And then out of that rebooted the individuated consciousness of Ryan. So I found myself like slumped over, like I had just like had a seizure or something, and music was playing in my head. So I was gone for so long that music was playing in my head, and I didn't remember what happened. I don't remember how I got there, how I got in the chair, where I was, who I was. And then I tried to recall like the thing I most recently remembered, which was um, falling through the ground. So falling through the ground, then the whole chain of memory clicks back in. The torus clicked in. the cessation of consciousness, perception, and feeling. That absence clicked in. The disc, everything arising as this proto awareness, proto individuated consciousness disc field that turned on, or like that was remembered. Everything was recalled, and then the mind just exploded with the bliss of emancipation. And yeah, then soon after that, I had another cessation that was even longer, and I couldn't tell whether I was dreaming the disc field or the disc field was dreaming me. I couldn't distinguish. And it was at that point that I knew the further insight knowledges were around the corner. I was like, okay, I'm probably gonna, like, I've been meditating for 9 hours now. It's 12 a.m. There's no way I'm gonna sleep. By the time the sun rises, I will see my past lives, or I will enter my past lives. I just had a sense that was going to happen, and yeah, that's exactly what ended up happening. So, because in that level of, I don't know, that level of immersion,
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to see things before they would happen. Right. It was like, for me, it was a very precognitive thing. Like, part of what happened in that state as well, even before the past life knowledge arose, was that I saw things that people were going to say to me the next day, like word for word. And that's exactly what happened. So yeah, I saw conversations a day before they occurred. I saw events months, even as far as a year out before it occurred. And they all occurred. It wasn't like some power that I had necessarily. It was just what that um yeah, that wasn't the point where I became that, like, super consciousness yet. I was communicating with that super consciousness. It wasn't until after I emerged from the past life thing that I was that thing. But up until that point, there was communication with it, and it was showing me, hey, XYZ, whatever, this is gonna happen. So be prepared. Yeah, and those events did end up transpiring. So to answer your question on, did I know it was coming on? Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was coming on.
Wow. Yeah, no words for that. That's incredible. I mean, the precog, I mean, yeah, just and this idea of, yeah, of course, like it happening to you. And so in those moments where, you were seeing, the future was arriving, really.
Right.
Um, did I mean, do you remember how you felt?
Disbelief.
Disbelief. Yeah.
Yeah. Disbelief. I didn't believe what that thing was telling me. It was like, hey, this is what's gonna happen. This is the truth about this situation. I've worded it like this, like that particular revealing, or that particular contact. That was my Arjuna meets Krishna moment of my life,
Oh,
where things that I didn't understand about my past, in that moment, they were revealed to me. Things what was happening in the present moment that I didn't understand, that was revealed to me. What will happen in the future that I otherwise wouldn't understand was revealed to me. Like, the truth of my life was displayed, was revealed. And you're from that moment, you're ordained to suffer the consequences of what was revealed. Yeah. Because what was revealed is what was is what you, quote unquote, signed up for in the last interim between incarnations. So that was revealed too, like the nature of spiritual practice, how all of these methods and techniques, they're managed by matrices of deities depending on the lineage and whatever. Like how all the different spiritual systems, they're essentially reality tunnels. They're programs that were created by highly advanced forms of intelligence to get people to spiritually cultivate and get off the earth reincarnational cycle. I saw all of that. And I was like, wow, this whole thing is a very intricately designed matrix, consciousness development matrix.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really amazing. It's really, yeah,
Yeah. So
it's incredible.
yeah. Yeah, so it I knew from that day or from that moment, like my fate was sealed, right? It was
Mm,
like whatever, like your time is not your own anymore. At some point, you will become this. At some point, you'll lose all attachment. At some point, this is what it will be like for you. So you're getting a full day of what the later half of your life will be like. Yeah.
damn.
Yeah, so it was like on one hand it was glorious, and on the other, my life was incinerated. Like the presence of that, they call it the angel of the higher self, or your contact with God. It 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 incinerated my life. So is that because I'm a teacher, or because of the things that I need to write and share? Likely. I don't know if that happens to everyone, or what the deal is exactly for other people. Because I read lots of spiritual. There's lots of
Mhm.
people that have written about this, and it's not doesn't seem to be talking about the exact specific stuff. Like in Bob Monroe's case, he wasn't like wiped of attachment in any of that. His in the at the end of his third book, his wife passed away, and he was really, really clearly distraught about the whole thing. And the last period of his life was pretty depressing. But from that level thing that I had awakened as, like, it even sounds crazy to say it. It sounds crazy to say how if my mother was to pass away, or the people that I love were to pass away, how could I not suffer from that, right? Of course I would, if I'm totally locked into space time. But if I wake up as that thing, and I've lost 100,000 mothers, and I've
Mm.
been 100,000 mothers, would I really feel the same way about it? I don't know. Because from that level, it did not seem that suffering as we experience it is possible.
Mm.
Yeah. Like suffering for the pain in the hearts of all beings. Yes, that was the thing. That was definitely a thing. But like the personal, I lost this, I lost that, I gained this, I became that. Like that was all. If you've done it 100,000 times or a million times, what do you really have the same perspective on it from that level? I found the answer was no. Yeah.
Wow. Right. Because then you're losing your father just over and over and over again.
You were your father. This
And
thing.
then, right. And then there's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. you, you were your father in the dream of making your son go through this loss, but then you were him and you were losing the son, and it's all this like back and forth, this like multi-dimensional thing through time. It's crazy. You're like you're You like lost and gained everyone all at once. Yeah, you're like forever living and forever dying perpetually, you know. So
Mm.
it begs the question. It begs the question if my assumptions are even correct, and if it's even possible to live as a human in that. I don't know actually. You know, like that's just what the being told me. He was right about everything so far, but I don't know if that's completely true. Because yeah, from that state I realized, for example, that like a lot of the meditation practices, they also have a like a post awakening effect. So like for example, contemplation of the body or mindfulness of the body, that's you know, that's called satipatthana, and
Mm.
you do awareness of the body and whatever, right? What I
Mhm.
found in that state was awareness of the body is the only way that you don't vanish off into infinity every second. Never occurred
Right, totally.
never occurred to me that was a thing. I was like, oh, like this is the only way to actually be here, is to like be anchored in the body. To the reason that people are moving around all the time is because if they stopped moving around and stopped doing stuff, the freaking God consciousness in them would awaken from this place. And their system resists it.
From fear or
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
100%. Like it became very clear to me. Oh, people are always in motion. They're always moving. They're always doing something. Is because that's what keeps God asleep in you.
Mm.
You have to be moving. You have to keep trying. You have to keep doing. You have to keep going. But it's as soon as there's a cessation of that, that's when the Lord begins to wake up. And that's where the horror comes from, and the dark night, and all of this. It's your whole body narrative, mind narrative, all of that. It knows that it's ending. That's where the fear comes from. And in some people. Why is it ending? It's ending because the true being in you is beginning to open its eyes. The guru principle, the dreamer, God.
And thus the what you wrote me about the light in the well.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. It's gonna be great to dream tonight. Um,
Exactly.
yeah,
Okay.
I do. I can feel that I'm in like a this this very like this liminal space. Like it's it's yeah, just absorbing and absorption, feeling. Yeah. Um, because in some capacity, the spaciousness of what you're saying is incredibly profound. And I guess that's what I'm feeling into is the spaciousness of the matrix and that viewpoint.